This morning we've had various images, mother images, via faculty, via our life experiences, and via particularly our own personal experiences. And I would just like to give a little anecdote about Bertha Reynolds, because she has been very much on my mind this weekend. When I was taking the D plan with Bertha Reynolds, I happened to be talking to two of my classmates about how difficult I was finding it to understand Rank. And then I boasted, but I do understand Freud. And of course I didn't, but at least it seemed I could do it better. And at that point, Bertha Reynolds was walking by our little group. And she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, Miss Silbert, she said, you know what I do when I have trouble understanding Rank? I just put my mind quiet. I just tell my mind to be quiet and I open my heart. And I thought it couldn't have been a nicer way of talking about how in learning we hope to be able to balance the thinking and the feeling. But she did it in her own inimitable way.
And I want to echo what Louise Bandler said about Bertha Reynolds, who was probably the most meaningful person in my life while I was at Smith. I had a little trouble getting into Smith because Everett Kimball, who interviewed me as a senior at the college, thought that I was a little young. I graduated 3 days before I was 20 from Smith. And he wanted me to take a year off, and I said I simply couldn't. I couldn't afford to take a year off, and I didn't want to go work at Macy's or be a teacher. And those were the two options open at the time. So he said, well, we'll try you. And Bertha Reynolds also interviewed me, and she said, we'll try you. We'll be good to you. We'll take care of you. You'll grow up. Did you? Well, I've had a hard time without Bertha. Anyhow, my first placement was in Philadelphia at the exquisite location of the Family Society in Kensington near the Glue Works. And the big project that I was assigned at the time was to qualify people for eligibility for free soup, which was a dead hand will gift of somebody from the Girard Society. And so for 2 months, I was supposed to say whether or not you could have free soup in 1935. And I had a little trouble, and after 2 weeks, when I had not turned anyone down, my supervisor said, Elaine, I don't think you understand. You're not being discriminated. So I wrote a quick note to Bertha Reynolds, figuring I would be expelled unless I turned somebody down. You know? And Bertha wrote back and said, just keep on giving it out. Now, later the same year, I had been taking care, I had been assigned an orthopedically handicapped child whose doctor and medical history I was very well aware of. And one day on my way to work, I slipped and cracked my shin against a curb, and I knew exactly what to do. I took a taxi up to this best orthopedic surgeon in Philadelphia, and he put me in a cast, and it cost me 70 cents for the cost of the plaster that he put around my leg. And I phoned the agency and said, I was so sorry, but I would not be able to be in for a whole week that I had broken my leg. Well, I got back to my room. I was living in a furnished room, of course. It cost me, I think, $30 a month. And there were flowers from the staff of the Kensington Family Society. And I was home for a week and bored to death, really bored. So I had this walking cast, and I went to work the next week. The cast was dry. I could manage just fine. and they almost dropped dead that I was so sincere. And I think this endeared me to my Philadelphia supervisor forever. But meanwhile, Bertha, I had gotten in touch with the school too to say that I was going to be out, and Bertha wrote me the most priceless letter about knitting. And she described different kinds of knitting, and the most important thing that I had to do for the next 6 weeks was to just tend to my knitting. So that I echo what Louise said about the warmth and the maternal caring that came out of this marvelously retiring woman. She was just so quiet. You simply had no sense of her power unless you really came in contact with it.